Well, good morning, Crossroads Christian Church. How are you today? Oh, we can do better than that. It's the third service. This is Crossroads' 15th anniversary today. Did you know that? It's in the program. So, yeah. This is Crossroads' 15-year anniversary. And who was here on the first Sunday of Crossroads? I think we've depleted some of you. Yeah, some of you were like, there was not very many people in the second service. The first service was filled with them. So I think everyone who was here on the first Sunday might go to the first service still. But we are so happy to celebrate with Crossroads and celebrate this monumental achievement. 15 years of doing great work here in Joliet and around the area. It's incredible to see how God has blessed this community and how it's changed throughout those years and the journey it's been on. And I'm excited to be a part of that journey here as we enter into this 15th year of ministry in Joliet. For those of you that don't know, my name is Caleb Trimble. I'm the executive pastor for Westbrook and Crossroads. And basically that means I get to handle all the fun stuff that no one wants to do. So all the menial things like anything from HR to building usage to everything like that. So as you can tell, I'm probably a lot of fun, right? You don't have to butter me up or anything, but Yeah, no, I'm excited though to be continuing this series with you called, I forgot the name of the series, One Question. Wow. Oh, it's behind me. I thought I was like, ask a question. One question. I'm excited to be continuing this series called One Question, where we are saying basically, if we could ask God one question, what would that be? And if he gave us an answer, what would we want answered? And as I was thinking upon this and thinking through my sermon today, and this past couple of weeks I've been teaching it, the story came to mind as my freshman year in Bible college. And if you remember, a few months back, I spoke on my time in Bible college. But every single Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we had to go to what was called chapel. Now, for those of you that went to a normal school, you didn't have to do this. But for those of us that went to a Bible college, you basically had to go to church every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You're required to be there for 50 minutes. And this Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, whichever day it was, I decided I was going to skip. I was not in a great mood. I was upset, I was aggravated, I was frustrated, I was mad at God. So I decided I was going to skip that service. So I went back to my room, and I was not in a good place, actually. And I remember yelling out at God and being angry with him because the first 7 months of my college years, or college time, I had really been praying the same prayer over and over for 7 months. And it seemed like God was never going to answer it. And I prayed the same prayer faithfully that God would answer it, but it seemed like God would never answer it. I remember closing my blinds and turning out the lights and turning on some worship music and crying out to God, but he was silent. And I was angry because I remember passages like Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you. Or Matthew 21, whatever you ask for in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Or Mark 11, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. Or John 14, if you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. I've been spoon-fed these verses my entire life, and maybe you're the same way. I've been told that if I pray these things in faith, that God would do it, right? So what was I missing? Why did Jesus tell us these things? Why would Jesus say, if you ask, it will be given to you? Why would he tell us that if that's not the way that it was going to work? Was Jesus lying? Maybe he was answering everyone else's prayer, not mine. But I remember hearing a message in chapel earlier that year that the preacher had said that if God is not answering your prayer, it's because you don't have faith that God will answer your prayer. Which now looking back on it's dumb logic, but back then I remember thinking that, wow, I have faith that God's going to answer my prayer though. I know that he will, but it seemed like he wasn't going to, and I was angry. I was yelling at him. And that morning, actually, when I had woken up, I had received confirmation that God would never answer that prayer. And in fact, I knew that God was putting the final nail in the coffin and would never answer it. Because that morning I logged on to Facebook to see that this girl that I had liked was dating someone else now. You thought it was going to be a serious story? And then I turn around with that because I was angry. I'd been praying for 7 months that this girl would get to notice me in that way. And she never did. Now, true, I never asked her out, but I thought that if you prayed for it, that God would give it to you. And so I was like, just let her notice me. And she did not. Instead, she noticed someone else. And they were in a relationship, and I was legitimately angry at God in that moment. I thought he hated me because I thought he was denying me what I was asking. I was asking for something like, a relationship and maybe marriage, because that's, in Bible college, if you date someone, you're going to get married. But I thought that was what was going to happen, and it didn't. My life was ruined. I remember this time in my life because as I was looking through this text, as I was looking through this topic that I was going to talk about today, it dawned on me that the earliest memory I had of God not answering a prayer was this. And that's really sad to me when you think about that. I was really sad. I remember thinking that I was childish. I was thinking back on the story and I was like, I was so childish. Overly emotional, all over the place. In fact, today, if you have a conversation with me, you'll be like, he's void of emotion. It's because I used it all back then. I have none left. It's depleted. And I was overly emotional on this thing because when you're 19 years old, you're kind of not bright when it comes to those things. I remembered this story, but the emotions I felt toward God were real. I really did feel angry at God in those moments. I really did feel like he was ignoring me. I thought my prayer was a legitimate request of God, and he was ignoring that. And then I began to think about further back, and I thought of a time when I was at a church camp, and I remember reading in James that if you lack wisdom, ask God and he will give it to you. Easy enough. Prayed, God, give me wisdom. Went to bed, woke up, just as dumb as I was the day before. It didn't work. I didn't do it right, I think. I think I messed it up too. But I remember thinking that if I prayed it, it would just automatically happen. That's what I was hoping for, that God would hold true to his promises on that. And it didn't. And I remembered those moments in my life because as I was writing this sermon about this idea of unanswered prayers or why won't God do what I'm asking, it was one of those moments of, I've had some of those funnier moments, but I've also had some of those serious moments where God isn't asking or answering a prayer, where you feel like he is lying to you. Maybe you feel like you're not doing the right formula, right? You're not doing the ABCs of prayer. You're not doing it right. Maybe you felt that way. And I know that I'm not alone, because if you do a quick Google search of unanswered prayers, well, first and foremost, you'll get a Garth Brooks song. I just need to be honest, because if you Google unanswered prayers, you're going to get a Garth Brooks song. And then you'll get a lot of articles. I didn't know there's a Garth Brooks. I didn't listen to him growing up. My mom wouldn't let us listen to country music. It was the devil's music. And so we weren't allowed to listen to it. But I remember when I was researching this, it just made me laugh, because I'm like, wow, there's a lot of interpretations of Garth Brooks' song Unanswered Prayers. So many people have written about this. I don't understand if it's that. I have not listened to it. Has anyone here heard of it? A few of you? All right. I haven't listened to it. I still haven't. I preached this sermon last week at Westbrook, and I had the opportunity to listen to it, and I didn't. But I just kind of thought this is an interesting thing, that there are that many resources about Garth Brooks' song. But that'll be the first thing that comes up. But then after that, skip a couple pages. You know how you have to do in Google sometimes. Skip a couple pages, and you'll get a lot of Reddit forums, and you'll get a lot of blogs and articles, whatever it may be. Maybe it's on Christianity Today. Maybe it's on one of those free Christian websites that really gives really bad advice to you. But it'll talk about unanswered prayers that people have. And so I know I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that are also dealing with this idea of, why won't God answer my prayers? If you've gone down the Google rabbit hole before, you'll know that you start what video? What video would show me God's unanswered prayers? Why is there a video link for this? I want to see videos of God's unanswered prayers. And then I clicked on images, and it was like quotes that people had about unanswered prayers, like advice that they gave to us to help us cope with God's unanswered prayers. Now, I am a little bit different when it comes to my sense of humor. I find some of these things humorous. And I like to point out things within that. Maybe you're not that way. If you're not that way, I would invite you to kind of just plug your ears for the next 5 minutes or so, because I found some really fun quotes about God's unanswered prayers, and that I would like to share with you. Are you okay with that? Doesn't really matter. You're stuck here. So, the first one, obviously, was the Garth Brooks quote of some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I don't know. I mean, sure, it may help in the moment. But then we have another one that says, there's a reason for closed doors, unanswered prayers, and blocked roads. If your plans don't work out, it's because God has better ones for you. Now, obviously, my main issue with this is the grammatical errors, isn't it? That really upsets me more than anything. If you sent this to me, I would mark it up and send it back and say, thank you, fix those things. But I get the sentiment. I've heard it too. Your prayer isn't unanswered. God just has something better in store for you. I've heard that. I've said that maybe to someone. But then it's like God has this secret plan for you. He won't tell you just yet, but he has that secret plan for you. Then there's some unanswered prayers are only because God doesn't want to do something for us. He wants to do something through us. Oh, see the classic preposition switch there? It's not for us, it's through us. It all of a sudden changes the meaning, and that's like what people get tattooed on them. That's those kinds of statements. Again, great sentiment, but I don't know how much it does. And then there's this one that says, when God gives you a no, give him a thank you. He was protecting you from less than is best. Now we've entered into this attitude shift. When God says no, you say thank you. That's not what you would expect to do when someone says no. That's why you do it with God. You say thank you because he's protecting you from less than is best. Again, nice sentiment, not too helpful. Then there's this one that I really do love. God's no is not a rejection, it's a redirection. And I love this one because you can hear the communicator saying this and being like, God's no is not a rejection, it's a redirection. There's that pause that goes on for a long time if you've ever heard someone do something like that. It goes on and on and on. You're like, wow, that's a new thing that I've never thought about. It allows you to kind of like focus and reflect on it. And then we have, it does not matter how long it takes, God will fulfill the promises. Again, not a bad thing. True, God will fulfill the promises. You might be dead, but God will fulfill the promises. And finally, I have lived to thank God that all my prayers have not been answered. This one is just about gratitude. Have gratitude that all of your prayers are answered, because we should be thankful that God knows more than we do. So live with that kind of gratitude. As you can tell, and as I told you before, I think some of these are humorous. It's not saying that they're bad. I get the sentiment behind it. I get the heart behind it. I get like why you would want to say that, and maybe there's some truth in them, but at the same time, they're humorous to me because it's, in my mind, I'm like, when would you ever say that to someone? When would you ever say that? When is that applicable? When is that good advice to give? Because some of those things, yeah, they have a good heart behind them, and I know that God knows all and has the best for us. But that doesn't really help when you're sitting across from parents who have prayed fervently for years and years and years for God to deliver their son from addiction, only to get a phone call to hear that their son is overdosed. Like, those things don't help when they prayed and God hasn't answered that prayer, right? It doesn't help when you say God might do something through you instead of for you. That line doesn't really help when you've prayed and prayed and prayed that God would rid your body of cancer, that's your prayer, that he would do this for you, only to find out from your last chemo treatment that there's a fatal diagnosis. Like, you've been praying that God would do something for you. It doesn't help to hear that he wants to do something through you. And it doesn't really help to hear that God is not rejecting you. He's just redirecting you. That's all fine and good. But when you've been praying that God would save your marriage, and that's your goal, and that's what you're wanting, that God would heal your marriage, save it, and then you're handed divorce papers, you're like, it feels like God's rejecting me. It doesn't really help to hear that. It doesn't help to hear that God will fulfill the promises. It doesn't matter how long it takes. But when you've been taking steps and praying to get out of debt, you've been working hard at that, and then you're hit with an unexpected medical expense, you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but I wish that God would work a little bit faster. See, those moments to me are when you're saying those things, it's not like you're even helping. It's read the room, right? You're not even putting a Band-Aid on the issue. You're dousing it with salt. You're putting salt in a wound. So as we're in this series, questions that you may have about God or that you may have for God, and we're asking God for a definitive answer of why aren't you doing what I'm asking you to do? It may sound like a question a parent asks of a child. It may sound like an employer asking that of an employee. Why won't you do what I'm asking you to do? Why doesn't he fulfill? Why doesn't he do what I ask? Why won't he fulfill his promise? Why doesn't God answer my prayers? These are all variations of the same question of why isn't God answering our prayers like he says he will, right? And maybe you've asked that. And the last thing I want to do today to you is add salt to your wound. That you may have come in here with unanswered prayers that you're working through. And I don't want to add salt to your wound. I have experienced those same kinds of feelings. Now, true, the story I told earlier was a little bit more humorous, but I've experienced those same kinds of feelings. I have felt that pain. I have questioned God. I have wrestled with him. I have yelled at him and cursed at him. I have asked God why he has betrayed me. I have wept over things. I have questioned God's interaction with mankind. I have wondered if this whole Christianity thing is all a hoax. I have cursed God when I see other people's prayers answered and not mine. And I know I'm not the only one, and you're not the only one either. If you've been through that, you're not the only one. We see stories all throughout Scripture of people who have done similar things. In fact, we read one about David. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of David. When he found out that because of his sin, his son was going to die. In 2 Samuel, we read this. It says, David begged God to spare the child. He went without food and lay all night on the bare ground. The elders of his household pleaded with him to get up and eat with them, but he refused. Then on the seventh day, the child died. David's advisors were afraid to tell him. He wouldn't listen to reason. While the child was ill, they said, what drastic thing will he do when we tell him the child is dead? When David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. Is the child dead, he asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went to the tabernacle and worshiped the Lord. After that, he returned to the palace and was served food and ate. His advisors were amazed. We don't understand you, they told him. While the child was still living, you wept and refused to eat, but now that the child is dead, you have stopped your mourning and are eating again? David replied, I fasted and wept while the child was alive, for I said, perhaps the Lord will be gracious to me and let the child live. But why should I fast when he is dead? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him one day, but he cannot come to me. David fasted and prayed for 7 days. 7 days he said, God, would you change your mind? God, would you stop this? God, would you do something else? And God says no. 7 days David prays over this. God, why won't you do what I'm asking you to do? We have stories like Job, where the entire book is this conversation that Job has with his friends and with God. He kind of yells at God. He asks him questions over and over. God, why aren't you answering me? God, why aren't you answering me? Over and over, if you've read the book of Job, he just goes on. And all of his friends are saying, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And Job's saying, no, I haven't done any of those things. God is ignoring me. Why won't he answer me? I deserve an answer. And then he goes on this huge long monologue. It's like a rant that lasts from chapter 27 to 31. And he goes on and on and on and on. It's his kind of final discourse. In Job 31, we read this. He says, if only someone would listen to me. Look, I will sign my name to my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. let my accuser write out the charges against me. I would face the accusation proudly. I would wear it like a crown, for I would tell him exactly what I've done. I would come before him like a prince. Job's tired of asking God the same question, and he's really just wanting an answer. And if you've read the rest of the story of Job, you know that God does answer him, and it's a bit of a doozy of an answer. It's basically like, where were you when I formed this earth? It's not the answer he's looking for, but he gives him a doozy of an answer. He doesn't answer all of his questions that he had, but he does finally show up. But I want to look at a text today from someone else who prayed a prayer that we might not think about when we think about unanswered prayers. And that is the story, the text of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Because scholars and theologians will agree that this prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane is really one of those moments when we talk about within the creeds, we say God or Christ is fully man and fully God. You may have heard that phrase before, 100% man, 100% God. And this is one of those moments where we truly see Christ's humanity on display. We see his 100% man on display within this prayer. Matthew's gospel focuses on the agony that Christ feels in the garden. And where we are is he's already gone to the Last Supper. He knows that Judas is going to betray him. He knows that Peter's going to deny him. And now he goes out with one time with his friends to say, pray with me in this moment of agony. We read this in Matthew 26. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give into temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Then Jesus left them for a second time and prayed, my Father, if this cup could not be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But look, the time has come, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. I think Matthew's gospel dives deep into the agony and pain that Jesus was feeling in this moment. We see that. Do you see it when he's feeling that anguish over what was about to happen? Luke's gospel would actually describe it that he was praying so fervently that it was like sweating blood, right? Drops of blood were coming down from him. He was in extreme pain knowing what was about to come. And he was making this plea with God basically to say, God, if there's any other way, would you change it? Could you change it, God, if there's another way? He falls to his face in prayer. The translation I use doesn't really do a great job of describing it, but he falls to his face in prayer with God. I like how theologian Douglas Hare says it, where he says, in asking if it is possible, Jesus is speaking not of the chance of a physical escape to the barren hills outside the city, but the possibility of God establishing his kingdom without requiring the Messiah to suffer public shame and an excruciating death. God is all powerful. Can he not destroy evil without making his son its victim? Apparently the answer to this troubled question was no. There was no other way. If God can do anything, then why couldn't he do this, right? Why couldn't he establish his kingdom another way? Why must the suffering happen? These are questions that Jesus probably had in the back of his life. Why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to endure this? Is there any other way that you can do it? And so he prays over and over again to God, would you change it? Could you change it? Will you change it? If there's any other way, God. And yet he was met with a no. And sometimes we like to scroll over this and we say, yeah, but he's God, right? How many of us have thought that? He is God, so there's probably an escape route there. But in this text, we see that he is fully man. He is filled with agony. Not my will, but yours be done. Did you catch that? We may pass over it. We may glance over it. Not my will, but yours be done. We say that a lot. Not my will, but yours be done. But for Jesus to say, not my will, I am God, but yours be done, but God's be done. Not my will, man, but yours be done. Not what I want, but what you are doing. We see that full humanity. This is one of my favorite things to read about Jesus because it's a moment that I can connect with him. I don't know about you. Maybe you can connect with the other stories about Jesus, performing miracles. No? I can't connect with all those stories, but I can connect with feeling that God is not listening to you. Feeling that God is not hearing your plea. Feeling that God is not answering your question. I don't want you to miss what Christ does here. I don't want you to belittle the pain and the agony that he felt in this moment of praying to God, the Father, of praying to his Father and saying, is there any other way? Father, is there any other way? The amount of pain that he felt in that moment. And yet we know that isn't how things went. Jesus probably really could have used one of those inspirational quotes in that moment, right? No? He couldn't have used that. No, what we know, what he needed, though, was his friends. It's something that his friends weren't providing. Did you catch that? They kept going back, stay and keep watch with me, stay and pray with me, stay and pray with me, stay and pray with me, keep up, pray with me, stay awake, wake up, pray with me. Over and over, Christ asks his friends to pray with him, and they keep falling asleep. I would say that this is what most of us need in these moments where we are praying to God to answer our prayer, and it seems like he is silent. It's not a word of that, like an encouragement thing like that. It's friends to sit with us and to pray with us in that moment. It's people who will stand with us and who will pray with us. It's people who will surround us. It's basically saying, letting us know that we're not alone and understanding that why won't God answer my prayer is a question many of us have had and many of us will continue to have. Because when we get down to it, maybe hindsight's 20/20, but when you're going through the pain of trying to figure out why God isn't answering your prayer, there's no words that can satisfy that question, right? Nothing anyone says to you will be a salve to that question. You are in pain and you're trying to figure it out. And the thing that you need more than anything is for people to sit and pray with you. Many Christians want to have this word of the Lord and say, this is what God is telling me, when we are just called to pray with one another in those moments. So if you're sitting here today and the one question that you wanted to ask God is, why won't you do what I'm asking? I will tell you this. I don't know. I don't know why God won't do what you're asking. And I wish that I did. I wish that I had the mind of God and I could figure it out. But I don't know why God won't do what you're asking. But what I will do is to continue to sit and pray with you. I've been a pastor at Westbrook for a little over 10 years. And I've seen the same prayers over those 10 years. I've seen some people pray. I've seen some people pray the same prayer for 10 years, asking God to change something, asking God to do something, asking God to save their marriage, asking God to save their family members. And I've been here now with you all for a year, for just a little over a year. And I've seen some of you guys pray the same prayers for this past year. And you're probably like, I've been praying that prayer for 20 years. I've been praying that prayer for 30 years. And you're probably sitting here being like, why won't God do what I'm asking? Why will God answer other people's prayers but not my prayers? Why will God fulfill those promises but not these promises? Why does God love others more than he loves me, it seems? And I've seen those prayers, and they're not bad prayers. What people are praying is things like getting out of debt, or praying that they would get married, or praying for a child, or praying to be able to adopt. Praying for miracles to happen within their marriage, praying that God would heal their loved one of an illness, praying that their mental illnesses might be alleviated, praying that a struggle that they have would just disappear. I've seen people pray for addictions. I've seen people pray for those they've never met. I've seen people pray the same prayers, saying, I wish that they would just understand how much God loves them. For 10 years, I've seen people pray that. And I know they're sitting there thinking, why won't God answer that? I'm not asking for anything bad. I'm asking for him to be made known in their lives. Why wouldn't he answer that? And I don't have an answer for you, but I will let you know that I'll continue to sit and to pray with you in those moments. Say, God, hear the prayers of your children. Hear the prayers of your people. God, hear their cries and listen to them. And I would encourage and challenge you within that as well, is to add just a little bit of a phrase to it, which is, not my will, but yours be done. It's not saying that that's going to fix anything. I don't want you to think that at all, but I want you to recognize that what that does to us is say, let's go of control. Not my will, but yours be done. We recognize that it's God, not us. Not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours be done. And it gives us this humility to God that ultimately we are surrendering to his will. Not my will, but yours be done. It's not saying that anything we're praying for is bad. It's saying that we recognize him above all. Not my will, but yours be done. So as we close today, I want you to know this. I'm not going to give you an answer for why God won't answer your prayer. Why won't he do what you're asking? I've asked this question many times, and I know that I'm going to ask it again. And I want you to know you're probably going to ask it again as well. Why won't God answer my prayers? But I want you to know that as a pastor, as one of your pastors, I'm committed to continuing to sit and to pray with you. Say, God, hear the prayers of your people. Listen to the prayers of your people, God. Hear their cry and answer them. I will continue to sit and pray with the same passion and zeal that you have in that prayer. That is what we are called to do. And so today, as we close, I want to encourage and challenge you. There are some prayer partners in the back of the room, and maybe you just need someone to pray with you. Maybe you're tired, you're angry at God, you're done with it all. You just need someone to pray with you. So I'd encourage you to go back there and to pray with them. Maybe you don't have the words. The Spirit intercedes or intervenes for us in those moments. The Spirit comes and speaks for us in those moments. And maybe you're saying, I don't know why God won't answer my prayer. And the people in the back of the room are going to say, I don't know either, but let's pray together. Because that's what we are called to do, is to sit and to pray with one another. Not my will, but yours be done.